Welcome to the Horse Girl Gazetteer. Join Georgia and Kate as we dive into this week's conversation. From health and fitness to communication and understanding, we are determined to develop our maps and help you to develop yours. Well, hello. We have a very fun episode today. This is our first bonus episode for our new Patreon, which if you are interested in more fun, goofy content, we're going to be releasing these bonus episodes every other week on the off weeks from the standard episodes. And that's patreon.com/horsegirlgazette. We also have some other options like a private Discord chat, or at a higher tier, there is going to be some cool stuff coming from Kate. Do you want to?
Yeah, we're going to have a study circle. So it'll be like a live Zoom option to ask questions and chat about what everybody is experiencing in their horse life. And then we're going to also have the option for people to submit a video for critique and feedback and kind of conversation about what you specifically are working on.
Yeah. There's also going to be an option for $15 a month, I think, for a pre-recorded Centerline quote lesson, which Centerline is one of Kate's new projects.
Yeah, I'm offering custom rider workshops around biomechanics and mindset, mindfulness, all the kind of rider side stuff. And those are available in person locally. But another piece of that venture is going to be creating a audio library of pre-recorded lessons. And they're going to be kind of along the lines of, I think, imagine guided meditation, but specific to riding and specific to the mechanics of riding. So going beyond just mindfulness, although there will be some of that. These are going to be designed to kind of walk you through becoming more aware of your body and how it's influencing your horse. And I'm going to write scripts for these, thinking about them being applicable to most rides, most horses, most humans.
Yeah. So we have a whole bunch of cool stuff. Again, it's patreon.com/horsegirlgazette. And it'll be linked on our Facebook and our Instagram and all of those fun spots as well. For today's bonus episode, we have brought on my friend Jay.
Hi.
Who is a horsey beginner and has brought us a whole list of their questions. And I don't really know what more to expect because that was the instruction.
I tried to think broadly about how many different things I could ask about and throw in random stuff as well. I'm hoping, that this can spark a little bit of some interesting conversations. I know this podcast is mainly about relationships between riders and horses, but what about the relationships between horses and horses? I know I've heard a little bit about herd dynamics and herd stuff, but what does bonds between horses really kind of look like? Or the opposite of that? Horses
when they
just
do not like each other.
Really hate each other.
Do you want to take this one?
Sure. I model my understanding of herd behavior in a big way after the harmony horsemanship approach to training horses. I think it has a particularly evidence-based, well-supported, and balanced view of understanding how horses get along. We have to remember that horses in a domestic situation and in a riding school on a horse farm with fences are in a dramatically different environment from a horse that is, quote, wild or feral.
Right.
So in a quote wild situation, you're looking at much larger groups of horses on much bigger spaces.
Right.
So they're moving, 20 miles a day, eat a little here, that leaf, that stick, some grass over there, wander to somewhere else with water, keep walking. They're just constantly moving, which is physiologically relevant, right?
Right.
This influences how their feet grow, how their bodies work, how their digestive system works.
Right.
There is significantly less competition for resources in the same way that there's competition for resources when they're in a small space and there is, maybe one round bale or a few piles of hay or one source of water.
I see.
There's a little bit more social pressure and sometimes a lot more social pressure when they're in a more confined space.
I see.
With those kind of critical resources.
Mm-hmm.
So that can have a big influence on how horses interact with each other. And I think that most aggression in horses is around resources. So I think you see more aggression in horses kept in horse farms than you would maybe see if you were just observing a wild herd.
I see. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. They do very, very clearly have a hierarchy.
Yes.
Anyone who watches horses for enough time will see who is kind of the prime mover of the herd, who's the one who's directing traffic a little bit. It is not always the horse that appears to be the most aggressive.
Okay.
So it's not always the horse that's pushiest or grouchiest with the flattest ears and is moving everybody in that way. It's more often the horse that will stand their ground and can flick an ear and send the other horses.
I see.
Off.
I see.
They are often sharing resources because they're so confident they know that they don't need to fight to protect the resources because they're like, well, here it is, we can share. No big deal.
This is my kingdom.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're confident. So that is the idea of the passive leader. And I think natural horsemanship has moved in the direction of understanding that and away from the idea that there's like an alpha who has to demand respect constantly and has to push everybody around in order to maintain that.
I see.
And so it's shifted to this idea that the one who is the leader of the herd is the one who controls speed, space, and direction.
Okay.
So this is the horse that determines when we all run, when we all stop, when we turn.
I see.
There's one horse that usually kind of starts that.
The traffic
controller.
Traffic control man.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
The one switching, the red lights and the green lights.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Right. So and you want to really trust that person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They got to be certified.
Exactly. And they can't be like flinchy.
Yeah.
Right. Or like freaked out about stuff. You want a pretty confident horse as the leader.
Absolutely.
In the absence of a confident horse as the leader,
it's
sometimes the pushy horse might end up as in the leadership role if the other horse has a tendency to be particularly submissive and is just like, I'm out and walks away. That could happen. But in our herds, we have 2 horses, 4 horses, maybe 6 horses, at least here. Other places have bigger herds. So there's a little bit less play in the hierarchy.
I see.
When there are that few personalities.
I see.
They do get very attached.
Yeah.
There are significant bonds between horses.
Because today we were working with some of the mini ponies.
Yes.
Here at Hideaway. And I just noticed, like, the farther away, I forget.
I think
the one
Penny.
that's not Pepper.
Yes.
Oh, Penny. When Penny was getting farther away, Pepper started freaking out a little bit.
Yeah.
Being like, what's up? And Pepper is all, old. So can't hear or see well. So I was like, oh my gosh. Well, she can't even see where her buddy is.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
and I think in that duo, Penny is very much in charge.
I see.
And so I'm sure that Pepper is like,
it's
my
like,
protector.
help
now
me.
I have to be in charge. I don't want to be in charge of anything.
Somebody help.
At 30.
I see. Yeah. Like, I've done my time.
Yes.
I see. Okay, interesting. That kind of might lead in to another question I had. What dictates which horses can actually reproduce? And like what parameters are about that? Because I know that a lot of horses here are fixed, right?
Yes.
And like, because I know my reference for this is domestic cats are a big problem and invasive and horrible. Mm-hmm. And obviously those are predators. But for prey animals like horses and wild populations of horses, like outside of farms and places like this and barns and stuff, how out of control is that? Especially maybe in the US or like in other places where they're actually native to the area.
Yeah. The only place that horses are truly native is in Mongolia.
Right.
The Przewalski's horses. And all of the other, quote, wild populations are actually were feral because they are invasive and they were released or escaped from other domestic
wherever they were brought
situations.
From.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Better question for Savannah, actually, who has spent more time out west and around Mustangs. I know that there are a number of government efforts to round up Mustangs
I see.
for population control
Absolutely.
because they influence farmland. If the population gets too big, they become less healthy,
Yeah.
which is a concern. But I don't know too much about
I see.
kind of what, I mean, I would assume access to resources.
Yeah.
Is
Totally.
is what limits reproduction and health.
In general, like
In
what is
general.
even survivable.
Right. And like
Condition-wise.
what their conditions are that are
Okay.
where they're located. And I
That
think
makes
there's a little bit of variety in where different herds are. It is interesting though, because the herds in different locations are noticeably different. Like phenotype, how their bodies are put together
Okay.
varies and temperament
I
some
see.
varies by specific management area and
I
by
see.
specific herd. And
Okay.
whether that is more to do with the genetics of, the 7 horses that started that herd, or if that has more to do with the environment that they're coping with and are, slowly but are evolving with. I'm not sure, but it is certainly interesting.
One interesting thing that came to mind for me, because you mentioned most of the horses here are fixed, which is true, but I don't know if you know this, which is that it's exceptionally rare to fix a mare. That's like really hard. It's really a pain in the butt to do surgery on a horse.
Highly
It's a
invasive.
lot easier to band the stallions and deal with that.
Do a gelding, yeah.
Yeah.
gelding,
One
yeah.
and done. I see.
Yep. Because that's all
Yeah.
out in the open.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yes.
easy
You
to
have to
take
go
care
in.
of. So that's why mares have heat cycles and all that sort of stuff, because they are dealing with their hormonal rhythms. Like if you left a dog unspayed,
Right.
she would go through heat cycles. It's the same thing with a horse.
I see.
So
Sometimes people forget this when they're working with mares versus geldings because they forget that they do have a hormonal being that they're working with that is
I see.
naturally experiencing those hormonal changes in a way that a gelding who has limited testosterone.
mares have a reputation for being moody and grumpy and this and that, and geldings have a
Argumentative.
reputation, and geldings have a reputation for being like relatively chill and
Kind of dopey.
and it's like, well, I wonder why. It's a pretty direct biological reason for this.
I'm understanding, I think, a lot more behaviorally. I'm understanding.
Amazing.
You mentioned the way that horses evolve build-wise and like shape-wise. Can any type of horse learn any type of specialty? Or do they kind of have their own genetic pinholes that they can go down? And can that even be broken or changed or go to different routes?
Yes, and also yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes to all of the
Oh,
above.
yes. Okay.
There are certainly
Interesting.
breeds that are predisposed to certain things and that are bred for certain things. Like we breed draft horses primarily to pull heavy things, and we breed the big fancy Lusitanos to do dressage, and we breed thoroughbreds to race, and we breed quarter horses to do the short races like the barrels and gymkhana and stuff like that. But you will find several stories of horses like breaking out of their discipline and doing something cool and different. And so, yeah,
I see.
it's kind of both.
Okay.
It's like nature versus nurture.
Interesting.
Well, it's the same way that like I could probably learn how to do any Olympic
Totally.
discipline. I would
But
not
will
win.
you? Yeah.
Any of them.
Okay,
Like there is
Actual
actually
affinity for.
right. Usain Bolt, right? My body will never ever, under any circumstances, be as fast. Right?
I see.
Because there's an element of like training for an event that is learning and practice and management, and there is so much of that goes into riding and horsemanship, as with any like athletic endeavor. Nutrition and injury recovery and like all of these, there's like management factors and then there's luck factors.
Totally.
But then there's just like, this is the body you get.
All right.
It's the one you're born in.
Yeah. Born this
and
way.
Basically.
Yeah.
And there's just like under absolutely no conditions is my body turned into something that is faster than Usain. Like I just am never gonna beat Usain.
If you and I, to bring it down to a personal level, did the same weight training regimen for a month, I would be able
there's
to
no
lift
way.
more at the end of it.
Absolutely.
Just
Yes.
based on our, and if we both
I see.
did running for a month, you would be a lot faster than me.
Yes. Yes. So same with the horses. Can you train a horse, any
see.
horse in dressage? Absolutely.
Yes.
It will absolutely benefit them. Are they
How
going to
effective
win?
and
Be
Jules
faster?
is not going to the Olympics.
I see. Okay. How swimmable are horses?
They're surprisingly good at swimming.
Yeah,
I think a lot of
Okay.
people are surprised by how good they are
I
at swimming.
see.
They're really fun to take swimming. Too.
Yeah.
I really can't wait to get Jules in the water. I think he's
Yes.
going to have an absolute ball
Yes.
with it.
Aw.
I mean, funny little anecdote. My pony, Maverick, his version of swimming is he paddles along really chill and like slowly starts to sink, and then like his nose goes under the water and he panics and he paddles really hard and he comes flying up out of the water, and then he'll crash back down again, and he'll like very chill like paddle and like start to sink again and then freak out. So like they can
A
be dumb,
majestic,
but he is capable of it.
Yeah,
a
they're
majestic
definitely-
ocean animal.
Yeah, they're not really meant for swimming.
No.
Yeah, I can understand
But
that.
There is certainly some danger involved in swimming with horses.
Totally, because
Because
like
they can
Oh.
aspirate, like if they get water in their
Oh.
noses, then
Yeah.
they can drown.
I see.
But
Okay,
just from
And also just
inhaling too much water,
body to body. If you don't fall off if you're swimming with a horse.
they're just bigger.
Just
You're-
don't.
yeah,
just
you're
don't.
gonna
just stay
be-
on. Please stay on.
it's over. It's over
not
if you're
great.
fall.
It's not good if you fall off when you're swimming with a horse. But like the Chincoteague ponies get swum.
They can. They certainly can. Better than you would think, but also not like a fish.
Certainly don't. Have
No.
or even a manatee.
no
No
hippocampus
mer
over here.
horse. Sad. I just have written pony rides are a lie? Question mark. Are they a lie? And you can't actually ride a pony, right? Like an actual young horse.
Oh,
You know, you
this
can't
is
actually
interesting.
ride that.
Yes.
A
Right?
pony is not a young horse.
Oh.
So a pony is below 14.2 hands, which is the unit of measurement for a horse. Like a baby horse would be like a foal. And if it's a boy, it's a colt, and if it's a girl, it's a filly.
Gotcha.
But no, this is
Mind explosion.
this is a
Yes.
very common,
Common
misconception.
Common mistake.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yes, like
you heard it here first. Not at all. This is not the first time this has ever been said. No way.
breaking news: ponies, not young horses.
Crazy concept. That kind of plays into another question I had of
Sure.
like, what are the biggest no-nos? Like, what can happen to a horse that makes it unable to be ridden or interacted with? Like,
That list
a
is
horse that
so
isn't
long.
even.
It's so
that's
long.
that's
It's
a lot.
actually
It's such
it's
a-
more likely it's
so
like
nuanced.
less likely that nothing terrible is gonna happen than that many terrible things
Yeah.
are gonna happen. They're incredibly accident
A
prone.
list of
you
horse
know?
trauma.
is endless.
I can imagine. Because, like, they don't understand
Yeah.
I'll
the
say
world
it's-
the way we do.
It's kind
So
of
I
a
can-
heated debate about how young you should start a horse.
Okay.
Obviously, race horses and stuff get started very young, which I do not personally agree with because their bones are still developing, and horses don't tend to finish fusing and developing their bones until they're like 7 or 8. So when you're doing hard work at a younger age, it can be really hard on their
Can
body.
mess, like, physiologically.
Yeah. So
If you think about like the development of like a kid
Totally.
and doing sports, like what is
Soft
sport?
baby skull, you know.
What does sports look like for like an elementary school student versus a college student? Like the intensity
Absolutely.
of practice, and you know, we keep that age appropriate for kids.
So, makes sense to do it for horses as
Would
well.
make sense to do it for horses, but that doesn't always happen
Totally.
because there's certainly pressure. You only have so many years to teach the horse all the things.
Mhm.
and a lot of
There's,
disciplines
like,
have a lot of pressure to perform high level really young.
Yeah, not all of them,
yeah,
and like
which
certainly
is also true in big sports.
Yeah, I'm not starting young horses to do
Yeah.
anything particularly intensive myself, so
Mhm.
I can't really speak to what the process is for people
Makes
who are
sense.
doing that and like what they're thinking about as far as welfare and longevity and what their motivations are or what their considerations are. But I do know that there's some like interesting graphics out there about the age at which different bones finish developing.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems obvious to me that the way that you work the horse is going to probably influence how those develop.
Absolutely.
And there may be some real benefits as far as like the development of strong tendons, having them on different surfaces, having them learn about their bodies, doing postural work at a really, really young age sets them up to start their development a balanced
Like, properly.
square instead of,
I see.
you know,
A wonky,
a
octagon.
wonky
Yeah.
trapezoid or something,
I
you know?
see.
So horses come out of the womb unbalanced and asymmetrical because they're not, you know, perfectly stacked up in there.
Totally.
They're squished. So then they come out and the birth process is traumatic for
Absolutely.
most mammals, I think.
Yeah.
Everyone
For
involved.
all of us, we've all got birth trauma somewhere.
It's the
And so
first trauma.
Right,
as
that's
they
the
say.
first one. So there is some work that can be done very, very early that addresses that imbalance. The farrier work can address that imbalance, and postural work can address that imbalance from a very, very, very young age. That totally sets the horse up for a long life of soundness, working on different surfaces, moving on different surfaces. And so I think it's easy to say, like, you shouldn't work a horse before age whatever, or you should always start the horse at whatever age. It's like, well, I mean, maybe.
Depends on you.
Probably depends on you and your horse. And I think probably whatever you're doing, if you're doing it with the best science you can find and the best knowledge that you can find with a system that's logical and thoughtful and has the horse's best interest at heart, then you're probably doing it right.
Yeah.
Or you're at least doing it the best you can. So that's all you can do. And good job.
I want to ask about the plethora of foot problems, but I feel like that list might be a little bit too long.
So actually, look forward to next week.
Okay.
Look forward to next week. We will have an episode where we interview our farrier Dash.
Just that question.
Pretty much just that question. We talk about collaborating with professionals and how to do that in a healthy and productive way. There's a lot of good stuff there.
This definitely circles back to the previous question about where we talked about horses living in nature, quote unquote, versus this. One of the things we're working on here is starting to think about planning a track system. Like I said, horses are supposed to walk, 20 miles in a day. When I say supposed to, I mean they would.
Like in a natural sense of the word.
Yeah. They've evolved to walk 20 miles a day to find food. So they're eating relatively poor quality food, probably. They're munching on sticks, leaves, and whatever grass they can find, which is probably not lush, fine second cut. And so they probably have a much lower sugar diet than some of our performance horses. Because we often feed high starch, high sugar diets in concentrate.
See, this is kind of answering another question I had, which was, can horses eat meat?
Yes. Can they? Maybe. Should they?
They?
Probably
No.
not.
There are some very interesting stories of horses eating meat.
Is it like a dire situation usually?
Yeah. Like there's
great. They can't digest it, is my understanding.
No. There was one, and this is a terrible story because I don't remember all the details of it. But there was a war, I think it was one of the world ones, and there was an expedition that had a horse and everybody died on it. And the horse did eat. Was found eating some of the body of one of the people who died.
Well, that's absolutely horrifying.
It was really horrifying.
Can we talk about track systems instead?
Yeah.
Yes, I cut that off.
Can we circle back to track systems?
You don't want
This
to
is a
think
horror
about
podcast now.
Eating predator horses.
No. Although you could read the Scorpio races,
New
I
movie.
think, which I have not read
Cannibal
because I just
horse.
can't even stand the idea of carnivorous horses.
I genuinely really enjoyed that book, but I read it when I was like 12, so this is not a recommendation or a guarantee of quality.
Everybody tells me I should read it, and I've just been like, no.
I remember enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
There were two distinct horses. It was not all horses are meat eaters. It was like the horses that come from the ocean. Those are the ones you gotta look out for. Which, to be fair, if a horse came out of the waves at me, I think I'd have some questions.
Yeah. No thanks.
But
Back
the
to track systems?
Yeah, the tracks.
The horses should be moving. They're probably not eating high sugar foods. High sugar diets tend to be not great for feet because the growth of feet is related to hormones.
Okay.
And so if you have insulin resistance, diabetes type, metabolic type stuff going on, that's going to influence the blood flow into the feet. And it's going to influence foot growth. So diet, strongly related to foot growth. High sugar diet's not great. Movement encourages the hoof to grow. Because as they're walking, they're grinding down the bottom. This is why wild ponies don't have to have a farrier.
Yeah, because
they're constantly grinding down their foot in the pattern that they're moving.
Absolutely. Okay.
So this means that if they are moving in an imbalanced way, their feet are going to continue being unbalanced, which is a thing we get to worry about if we want our horses to be well balanced. We get to trim them into better balance and then better movement and therefore better feet. And therefore better balance and therefore better feet, and it just keeps getting better.
It all spouts upon itself.
Exactly. But you're only going to tend to have as much growth as you have movement. So if your horse lives in a stall 12 hours a day, not a ton of movement.
I see.
So the track system is designed to provide the horses with motivation and space to move more without living on a 2,000 acre ranch.
I
or
see.
plain or whatever. So if you put food in one place and water in another place and have a path that they have to travel to get back and forth, then they're going to tend to spend the day wandering
Moving.
back and forth between the food and the water.
I see.
And ideally, that improves foot quality. Ideally, you put different types of footing for them to walk through, over, etc. So they're exposed to a lot of different textures.
I see.
And that is good for horse bodies as well.
I see.
So that's just an interesting thing about feet that we're working on.
I love that because I've also heard that their feet are technically just giant fingers,
Fingernails.
basically.
Yeah.
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 And their hoofs, cartilage, right? Or is it more than
there
that?
are soft tissues within the hoof cavity.
Yeah, the
It's-
frog, right?
It's literally like the tip of your finger. And then like their hoof is your nail, but just big.
Yeah.
Imagine a horse with 4 fingers. It's basically
No,
that's how a
thank
horse
you.
is.
I don't like it.
What would be the most expensive medical procedure you could put your horse through?
I don't know if I want to speak this into existence. Even thinking about it feels like
Because expenses is
Tempting
obviously a
fate.
big thing,
Yeah.
especially for adult riders
Okay,
and
like
people who run.
common or like.
horses.
'Cause
I was
don't
thinking, like,
even
what's the
know. I have
what
no
is the
idea.
craziest thing?
I don't have
you could
horses that
think
are
of?
getting any of those things, so I don't even
No.
know what they are.
I
It's a
see.
great
Oh my
question.
god.
I don't even have any idea. I mean, I can tell you the things that have been in my experience that were expensive, but
Yeah.
that's a pretty limited list.
We could start there though.
I mean, a colic surgery is going to be $10,000 or $20,000.
and what is that?
One. So if they have like a twist in their gut or an obstruction in their digestive system, you can do surgery to repair that, or they die. That's not really optional.
And a lot of it is like that, like
In-
bigger issues. It's like,
Yeah,
you either have to do it or it's over.
It's kind of the end. Yeah,
I
and sometimes
see.
that's the best choice for the horse. Sometimes if we
Right.
had a horse that maybe could have gone into colic surgery, he was older, he had Cushing's, the recovery was going to be really tricky, and it just didn't seem fair to put him through the surgery
Absolutely.
with the possibility that, one, it wouldn't be successful, and
and
two,
it's
that
trauma.
it was
I
going to
mean,
be a really rough recovery and high chances of repeating the colic once they've had
see.
that kind of invasive procedure. It can recur
I see.
sometimes, but so that's expensive.
Absolutely. That's expensive.
If you've done a quick Google,
Yeah,
I've done a
what's
quick
the-
Google search. One suggestion was a total hip replacement, which does in fact sound expensive. Also, I can't imagine
replacing the hip
replacing
of
the hip of a horse.
At what point is that just not even?
I have a fairly pragmatic approach to my animals that I think some people would find cold. I have a very young dog who you know and love,
Yeah.
Miss Faye. She's a collie. And like collies tend to be, she is ill-equipped to be alive. And we have spent probably several $1,000s on her vet bills at this point. But because she is young and she is otherwise a happy, healthy dog, she just had something weird going on. It turns out she has EPI. So like she just can't make her own digestive stuff. So she's good now and she's having a great time. And so if it's a situation where, for me, if it's a situation where a horse has something going on, but it's like we can figure out what this is and we can treat it and we can move forward. Great.
Effectively and quickly and
Right.
straightforward.
Right. My 24-year-old pony was down in his stall the other day, which he has never been. This was actually like a couple months ago. And my mom called me to let me know because we were worried that he had like seriously torn or broken something.
Mm.
And at that point, he's a 24-year-old pony. If he's in that much pain and it's going to be extensive surgeries, I mean, I would be heartbroken, but I would probably say goodbye to him.
Yeah.
Be like, thanks for your service. I'm not going to keep you around to deal with this. I would not get a total hip replacement on him.
Yeah, I mean, horse doesn't know what a hip replacement is.
No, and
No.
they
It's a
can't.
quality of life question.
Yeah, they
Absolutely.
can't consent to that sort of like
Recovery.
long-term recovery. Like I can't explain that to him. And especially, I think you also have to think about the horse too. Maverick would be miserable if he was on stall rest for a year. Like he would probably
like that's psychological torture at that point.
Yeah, he would have a terrible time. And some horses will do fine with stall rest. I think most would prefer not to be on stall rest. But I was actually thinking about this when we were talking about feet, because he has always been in a big, huge pasture. And he's always had wonderful feet. He has gone years without seeing a farrier. And then when he saw the farrier was like, oh, his feet look great. Like, who do you normally use? And we've been like, well, he's the first one in a while. And they've been like, oh, wow, that's impressive. So if he wasn't able to move around like that, I mean, I think his body would deteriorate in other ways and he would just be upset. But horses are just generally expensive. Is kind of the,
in general,
the key
it's all
takeaway from this
expensive,
question.
huh? Well, what would be the most expensive horse item that is worth it? Like the most expensive equipment, anything.
A saddle.
A saddle.
A saddle.
A good saddle.
Buy a good saddle.
See.
If
Buy
you're
a
going to
good
get on
saddle.
your horse,
I
you have to buy a
see.
good saddle. It is worth
Everything.
the $4,000. And if you can't, don't ride your horse.
Tea.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Hot take, but
Hot
And
take.
fair
I do feel
enough.
strongly about that.
I mean, I borrow Kate's smart saddles
Mhm.
for when I ride Jules, which is really wonderful. And I have a Thoroughgood that doesn't fit him perfectly, but fits him well enough. And the only reason I'm keeping it is for if I decide to take him swimming or something like that. So, because it's synthetic.
Yeah, kind
so
of
that way I
a
don't have to worry
trashy
about.
saddle.
Yeah. So I like having a saddle that fits well enough to like jump in the river with. But for your day to day,
You should have a saddle that really
Like a
fits.
nice-
you should have a
Like a
really that
good
really
one.
fits and take care of it.
Yeah.
Clean it, oil it.
Side note for people who, say, well, I'd love to have a $4,000 saddle, but it's just not going to happen. Bareback is actually can be a good option.
Good segue.
And I think that bareback can be hard on a horse's back if you are
Okay.
an unbalanced, bouncy rider. So if you're going to go that route, you're going to need
Be
to.
ready.
Well, you just have to progress at the speed of your balance. Because if you're sitting
I
on,
see.
on the heaviest part of your butt, on the lowest part of the horse's back, they're probably going to not be super happy.
Yeah.
But if you're really committed to good biomechanics and spreading out your weight
Mm.
in a really positive way, then I would much rather someone slowly ride bareback than ride in an ill-fitting saddle.
Wow.
Especially because the ill-fitting saddle is going to make you feel more balanced and encourage you to do things beyond what you really have the balance to do.
That's
Whereas if you
real
ride,
tea, actually.
if you ride bareback,
That is so interesting.
When I was younger, we had one saddle that fit between my friend and I, who I used to ride with. We had one saddle that fit both of us well, and it fit both the horses that we were riding. But we only had one, and so we would literally switch back and forth who got the saddle and who was bareback, and we did everything. That was still like we were still jumping logs and going swimming and doing all of that fun stuff. And we both had really good seats from it. Honestly, like we were solid.
And there are some great bareback pads out there that can help a little bit with spreading out, concussion and spreading your weight out.
You also learn to fall really well when you
you
ride
learn-
bareback.
You may learn to fall.
You learn how to fall pretty
Is
gracefully.
can it be slippery?
Yeah.
Mm.
There are a few times we
Sweat,
used
I
to
guess.
camp out in the barn. We'd like have sleepovers in the barn, which was so much fun. So we would get on the horses in our PJ pants the next day. We would go slippy slidey right off.
Uh-huh.
Fun.
With riding, obviously, I'm not going to play around and be like, do you have to be, physically fit to ride a horse? Well, of course you do, because it involves your whole body, I'm sure. Are there any long-term injuries, other than the obvious, like, concussion, getting thrown off, or anything that can, like, come about from just riding for such a long time? Like, anything, because I'm in the creative industry. I also have creative hobbies where I use my hands all the time. Carpal tunnel is coming for me soon. But I don't know if there's anything looming for a rider like that other than too many concussions. Hit head too many times.
The beauty of horseback riding for me is that it is very low impact until it is incredibly high impact.
So it really just is 0 to
It's
100.
really good for your body.
I
in a
can
lot of
imagine.
ways.
Well, I think good riding is good posture
Yeah.
and better
Absolutely.
body awareness. And it's about stabilization, not about impact. We're trying to reduce
see.
impact.
Yeah.
I think possibly some exceptions would be in the higher impact sports,
Mm.
higher impact disciplines. I think if you're a jockey,
Mm.
high speed,
You're
lots
like
of
really
lots of
working yourself and the
Your
horse.
knees.
I think your knees maybe
Knees.
could suffer. I think generally, I suspect that it's knees that people struggle with in riding. If you're an equestrian and you're 95 and you're hobbling around, it's not the time in the saddle that was the problem. It was the
I
times
see.
that you exited the saddle and
Mhm.
counted the ground.
I
Yes.
see.
The injuries that I have, like I have a knot in my hip from where I got thrown into a jump standard, and I have a concussion history from
Mm.
times I've gotten thrown into whatever was there. But like, as far as riding goes, it's actually been like extremely good for me and is like the best way to stay in shape for myself.
I think it's motivating to stay in shape and to pay attention to your body. I do fascia body work. So like my body is
I know a little bit about that. Yeah.
getting organized better and better the more I do that. And a lot of that is motivated by I'd like to ride better.
I see. We could end it off with a silly one. Can horses listen to music and know what's going on? Can they listen to tunes? Can
That's
they
such a cute question.
like, can they, like, because I know that they can only see like cooler tones. They can see like greens and blues. So like the color spectrum that they can see just ranges between that. But like, what are they hearing?
I mean, they certainly hear more than we do.
Absolutely.
I really have historically really liked riding with music.
Yeah.
If I was going out on a trail ride by myself, I would turn on a playlist that I knew pretty well and that was like pretty low key. And it tended to keep my horse, like Maverick, I don't know why I'm beating around the bush. It tended to keep Maverick a little calmer. And I think it's just because it was a consistent noise instead of like weird one-off things happening.
And it was the same every time.
I mean, not
More or
necessarily,
less.
but
I suspect playing music, I mean, I'm sure that they can hear it.
I don't know how much they care.
I don't know how much they care about it. I mean, I'm sure that like, you know, a rhythm beat is a thing that they're aware of. And I would imagine like our bodies are going to tend to find the beat. And I would imagine that part of it is if your body finds the beat, their body finds the beat. But I suspect probably they feel it a little bit themselves. But other people might have more impressive stories about that.
Maybe they're more ambient music likers.
Yeah.
Rather than vocal.
I'm a big fan of like one AirPod in listening to a playlist, which actually, speaking of the Patreon, patreon.com/horsegirlgazette, I have some different genres of playlists that I have that are trot and canter BPMs that I'm going to share out over the next few months, I think, that I just like to listen to. They're goofy. Like I have one that's country music. I have one that's like 2010s emo music. That one's my favorite. It's really funny. Yeah, there's lots of Fall Out Boy. Like I think there's a couple of Pierce the Veil songs.
Yes.
It's really goofy. I'm not a very rhythmically inclined person. So
It can be a really good strategy.
Yeah, it helps. And I've noticed when I do it with Maple, I can feel her beat be a little bit more consistent. Really quick, I'm going to ask you a question.
Whoa, I wasn't
Putting
prepared
you on the
for
spot.
this.
It could be something from today, or
Yeah.
it could be something just in general, but you've now been coming to the barn with me for like almost 2 years. I would love to know what your favorite thing is that you've learned about horses, or like your favorite moment that's happened.
I think getting to get on Jules bareback that one time, that was absolute peak. I think if I get to do that more often, it will all be worth it. Life is worth living if that's in my future, I think. Because
really
that was like a crazy decision to make, but like I don't regret it.
So
it was
getting
so
into
cool.
horses at all. So is getting into horses at all. It is in fact a crazy decision.
Crazy decision.
This whole thing is one big crazy decision.
Just aside from that, because that's like, oh, that was so cool. I'm gonna get to do it
fair
again.
answer.
I think just like learning that it is so much deeper than I thought it was. Like my perception of the whole horse community was like completely changed after like actually spending time here, because I never realized like how much work actually is necessary to make this work. Work. How much you really have to put into it physically. Like I had no idea. I was like, you get on horse, you ride horse. No, the horse needs to be taught how to do that. I didn't realize that for the longest time. Like horses naturally do what you want it to do. Like there's no innate like, yeah, that horse just knows.
I mean, you've gotten to see Jules in like the very
I
beginnings.
saw him do crazy stuff. I had to wave that red flag to keep him from just running right into the gate and freaking out.
Just for like
that was years ago.
Reassurance and justification for when you got to sit on him, because I heard you say it was a crazy decision. It was not.
Well, see, like,
it was a very calm day. He was being wonderful. You were fine, and you sat on him for like
2 seconds,
5 seconds. It was just to say you did.
True.
It was very sweet.
Wonderful.
And he was just like, well, this is weird. Whatever.
Without the context, me going home telling my roommate, hey, I just rode a horse bareback. They were like, what? You did what? I'm sorry. You did what? And I was like, yeah, and that horse never had done that before. And they were like, What?
Yeah, I kind of realized afterward, I was like, I don't think I've gotten on him bareback. Oops. Oh well.
What?
Sometimes I prefer to be on the bareback. I can feel more, and it's way easier to get off again if you're bareback.
I think
You
that's what I
just
meant.
get off.
I think that's what
Yeah.
I meant by you get good at falling. Just kind of like
Easy to get off.
gracefully dismounting.
You just get good.
But thank you, Jay. This was so
Yes, that
much
was
fun.
fun.
Thank you for
Um,
giving me the opportunity to be on the podcast.
Oh my gosh,
I'm on a podcast
absolutely.
now.
you can come back to ours sometime. If you enjoyed this is going to be the last free bonus episode. This is the first and last. If you enjoyed it, you can get it for $5 a month on our Patreon. It's one of our lower tiers. Patreon.com/HorseGirlGazette. That's GAZETTE. And we'll be posting bi-weekly on there, as well as our normal episodes and all the other fun stuff that we talked about. And all those tiers are listed out on there. It'll be nice and fun.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Hope we see you there.
Talk to you later.
Thanks for joining us this week at the Horse Girl Gazetteer. You can find us online at Horse Girl Gazetteer on Facebook or Instagram, and you can listen wherever you find your podcasts. You can also email us questions or comments at horsegirlgazetteer@gmail.com. Georgia can be found at Equine Virtual Assistant on Instagram and Facebook, and Kate can be found at Hideaway Acres on Facebook and Hideaway Acres Horse Farm on Instagram. If you found yourself enjoying our content, please leave a review to help others find their way to us. We appreciate any and all support. Talk to you later.